Yo, what's going on? Constellation Gaming here, and I'm back. This video is just gonna be a really quick explanation of where I've been, what I've been doing, and why I left, essentially. So, basic answer is I've just been kind of busy. I don't know how many people actually know this, but I do own my own business, so that does take up a pretty big portion of my time, especially during, like, any season that's not winter itself. So yeah, I've just been extremely busy with that. Also, my wife and I bought a house, so there's just all of that goes into it, the mortgage crap, and figuring out all that, doing whatever repairs that you have to do, all that stuff, so that's also been a part of why I've been gone. I've been wanting to come back for a little bit, but I've been prepping for an event in a different game that I play, Lorcana, which is DLC Indianapolis, which is essentially the equivalent of like Yu-Gi-Oh! YCS or an Open from Alestrals, but 2,000 players. So I've been putting a lot of my time into just prepping for that event to make sure that I can do as good as I possibly can. And yeah, that's essentially a big portion of why I've been gone for so long. Why I left, on a baseline, it's kind of just, I wasn't really enjoying it at the time. I didn't really like the meta where it felt like you essentially just stuck Celestia or stuck a really big guy with a bunch of stats and you just instantly won the game. Because at the time, there just wasn't really the removal that was needed in order to get rid of these threats properly, because stuff like Earthquake and Laurels were limited. So that was just kind of a portion of why I left. Another portion was just, I was starting to put way too much stock in my results, both for the videos that I was putting out and for results in any tournament. So whether or not a video did well or didn't do well was contributing a lot more to my mood than it should have, along with my tournament results. Partially because I was trying too hard to get some title for the video that would just catch people's attention. So I was just putting too much pressure on myself in that factor and just wasn't really enjoying it anymore, and for the sake of my mental health and actually putting out something that people wanted to watch, I kind of just had to step away for a little bit. Another part that I really don't like or didn't like about this, I still disagree with, but it's not really as big of a factor to me. I understand that just some games do limits and semi-limits, but I really don't like it, especially when a card's limited to one. Especially something like Earthquake, where it's just, okay, they drew the one of and I didn't, I lost the game. That just feels extremely bad in my opinion. I feel like if a card is strong enough, it should just straight up be banned. I don't really like the limits or semi-limits. I'm still of that opinion. But that was just another part of why I left. Not nearly as big of one, but it was a little bit of the factor of it. Another one was I felt like it was kind of just becoming Yu-Gi-Oh! 2.0 to me. And what do I mean by that? I still kind of think it is, but it's not in a bad way anymore. But what I meant by that previously was just, I came from Magic. That's always essentially been my priority, or my main card game that I factor while essentially looking at other card games in a lens of that. So the pacing of it is just a lot more slow, and you do a lot less actions per turn, unlike Yu-Gi-Oh! And so I was just feeling like on turn 1, people were just able to do a bunch of stuff, and it was just kind of too much to be able to do, in my opinion. But I really was just essentially looking at it through a very narrow lens of Magic or Lorcana, which is kind of very similar to Magic. One thing that just felt really bad while I was playing was just getting either not getting the Alestrals or not getting the counter runes. Essentially felt like you were getting mana screwed in Magic. Now, what do I mean by that? Essentially, for those unfamiliar with Magic, it has a mana-based system where you can play 1 mana per turn, and you use these in order to do your actions. They're similar to spirits, just not tied to your life. And if you don't draw the lands, you essentially can't do anything in the game. And that's kind of how it felt to me, whether or not you just didn't draw counter runes or you didn't draw the guys. It felt like you couldn't play the game unless you just drew a mixture of both of them. So that was just something that I wasn't really enjoying. Now, why do I say that I still think that it's like Yu-Gi-Oh! 2.0, but in a good way? Well, during this time period, I actually went through and kind of tried to play Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit. I was curious on exactly what it felt like. And while playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Essentially, I mainly played it on Master Duels, so there is that preference, but essentially I would just be watching somebody combo off for like 10-15 minutes, and then they wouldn't get one piece of their combo, and they would scoop, or essentially I would just instantly win the game, or they would have a board that blocked me off from doing anything, and they instantly won the game. It didn't really feel like there was back and forth. But now, looking back at Alestrals through that lens of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Some, it makes me actually realize that the spirits are a very good way of balancing the amount of actions that a player can do. Like, yeah, you could just vomit out everything like Stratamoth is doing at the moment, which is the big boogeyman right now, is obviously Stratamoth, and everybody's worried about just Stratamoth going insanely nuts. But there's a way to balance that because you're essentially using your life to do all of this. You can just be very quickly burned out of the game if you overextend. Which is part of why I don't like Eruption being banned or limited to 1, or the normal Eruption. But also, I'm biased. I'm fully willing to admit I'm just kind of a little bit biased. I do enjoy playing burns, so Eruption being limited just hurts my soul a little bit, but I'm willing to fully admit that that's bias, and I'm sure that, you know, triple Eruption just feels completely awful. But yeah, so the spirits are just a really good way and a really good balancing act that allows you to play similar to Yu-Gi-Oh! In the fact that you can just do a bunch of actions in one turn. But unlike Yu-Gi-Oh!, you can actually be punished for doing all of these actions and setting up your board so wide. And now with especially Sunstrike in particular, it feels like Alestrals has found this sweet spot where you can kind of play slower a little bit, more control-y, or you can kind of burst out a bunch of spirits, or you can aim to punish people who are bursting out all of these spirits. Not only that, it feels like a lot of the decks actually have an ability to break the board and come back from a lot of situations, whereas previously, sometimes even now, but a lot more previously, essentially Celestlio hit the board and you might as well just shake hands. You're done, you lost. Now, a lot of the decks feel like they do have this capability of breaking the board and coming back. So I feel like between essentially A-Drive's set building in the last, like, especially this one, but Livestream and kind of made it a little bit better, but it still felt sometimes like as soon as people got ahead, you just lost the game on the spot. But I feel like Sunstrike really has found that sweet spot in making this game essentially a way better Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's what I mean by saying this game feels like Yu-Gi-Oh! 2.0, because it does take a lot of inspiration off of that, obviously. He said it himself. And as somebody who's played a lot more Magic than Yu-Gi-Oh!, it does feel like a lot more of the inspiration comes from Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm not saying that as a bad thing by any means, but this makes it to where the game essentially feels like a drastic improvement and overhaul of Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself. So that's a big part of the reason why I'm coming back, and I've also just kind of been enjoying watching gameplay. So that's it. I'm not really going to be ranting too much. I'm not sure how much, if any of this, I'll even edit. Might throw some background music on there, but that's probably about it, if I can even get around to that, because I've been a little busy. But I hope you all have a good day, and peace.